I should never have left them. Never.
Hey there! Grab yourself a coffee and enjoy the story. Sarah Mitchell was always known for her warm smile and honey-colored eyes that shimmered with kindness. At 35, she observed her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her elegant home, trying to find traces of that young woman full of dreams she once was. Her brown hair, now shorter and with a few premature gray strands, framed a face that carried invisible marks of disappointments. Working as a librarian at the city's Central Library, Sarah always found refuge among the pages of the books she organized with such care. It was a modest job, but one that brought her some peace amid the turbulence of her personal life. Her co-workers admired her for her dedication and the attentive way she treated each visitor, never imagining the drama that unfolded behind her serene facade. At home, silence was her most frequent companion. Robert, her husband of 12 years, was rarely present, always busy with endless business meetings or dinners with important clients. He was a successful real estate agent, specializing in luxury properties, and made a point of reminding Sarah at every opportunity how her social position had improved since they married. In the immaculate kitchen of her home, Sarah prepared dinner automatically, following a routine that had long lost its flavor. The beige walls of the room seemed to suck all the energy from the place, just as her marriage had sucked her joy over the years. The aroma of roast chicken with fresh herbs filled the space, but she knew that, once again, she would dine alone. Margaret, her 65-year-old neighbor, was her only confidant. The silver-haired lady with a maternal smile had lived in the house next door for decades and had witnessed Sarah's gradual transformation. "Dear, you deserve much more than crumbs of attention," she would often say, offering tea and cookies along with her words of wisdom. That particular night, while storing the dinner leftovers in the refrigerator, Sarah found an envelope hidden among the grocery shopping. Her hands trembled as she recognized her mother's handwriting. Grace. It had been 5 years since she last had any contact with her family. 5 long years since she had chosen Robert over them, ignoring all warnings and pleas. The envelope contained a belated birthday card and an old photo. In the image, Sarah appeared smiling, embracing her parents, Grace and Thomas, in front of the modest house where she grew up. Her younger brother, Michael, made a funny face beside them. It was a reminder of simpler times, when love didn't come with conditions or demands. Sitting at the kitchen table, Sarah allowed tears to silently stream down. The contrast between the genuine happiness in that photo and her current reality was too painful to ignore. Robert would arrive in a few hours, probably with his usual critical mood, complaining about the cold dinner or some imperfection he'd find along the way. Margaret, who observed the light on in her neighbor's kitchen at that late hour, decided to pay a visit. She knocked softly at the back door, carrying a tray of freshly baked cookies, as she always did when she sensed her young friend needed support. Sarah quickly wiped away her tears, but couldn't hide the sadness in her eyes when she opened the door. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen when Robert finally arrived, past 11 at night. Sarah was sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a cup that had long gone cold, the family photo still in front of her. Seeing her awake, he frowned, adjusting his expensive tie in a gesture she knew well. It was his nervous tic when he was about to lie. "I thought you'd be asleep by now," he said, dropping his leather briefcase on the counter. The meeting with investors ran longer than expected. Sarah noticed a lipstick mark on the collar of his white shirt. Intense red, a color she never wore. Her stomach tightened, but years of self-control kept her voice steady. "How interesting. Jennifer, your secretary, called me 2 hours ago looking for you. She said you left the office at 6. Robert's face paled for a second before he composed himself. "Are you spying on me now?" "I don't need to spy to see the obvious, Robert." Sarah pushed her phone across the table. On the screen, a series of social media notifications showed photos of him at a luxurious restaurant, accompanied by a young blonde woman. The images had been posted by a mutual friend, who probably couldn't imagine the damage they would cause. "You're making a storm in a teacup," he replied, pouring himself some whiskey. "Ashley is an important client. We needed to discuss property details." "Ashley?" Sarah let out a bitter laugh. "The same Ashley who's been using your credit card for boutique shopping for 3 months?" Robert froze with the glass halfway to his mouth. Sarah continued, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled the credit card statement from an envelope. "You should be more careful with your passwords, dear, or at least remember to delete emails from jewelry stores." "You invaded my privacy?" His voice rose an octave, indignation replacing guilt in his eyes. "I didn't have to invade anything. You left everything open on the home office computer. I thought after lying for so long, you'd be smarter." Sarah stood up, feeling a strength she didn't know she possessed. "But you know what's worse than the lies? Knowing that you planned all this from the beginning." Robert frowned, confused. Sarah took another envelope from the kitchen drawer. This one yellowed with time. "Remember these tests you showed me 10 years ago? The ones that proved you couldn't have children?" She spread the papers across the table. "I found the originals you kept. You altered the results, didn't you? Because you never wanted children. Never wanted a real family with me." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert didn't deny it. Instead, his lips curved into a cold smile that Sarah had never seen before. "And if I did, what are you going to do about it?" He took a sip of his whiskey, watching her over the glass. "Look at yourself, Sarah. A dull librarian who was lucky enough to marry me. Do you really think you can start over at 35? No family? No real friends? No money of your own?" Each word was like a stab. But contrary to what he expected, Sarah didn't back down. Instead, she took the photo of her family and put it in her pocket. "My parents were right about you. Everyone was right." "Oh, now you remember them?" Robert laughed with disdain. "The same parents you abandoned to be with me? That simple family who didn't approve of our relationship? Please, Sarah, don't be pathetic." It was at that moment that Margaret knocked on the door. The sound made Sarah startle, bringing her back to reality. Through the kitchen window, she could see her neighbor with a worried expression, probably having heard the raised voices. Sarah opened the door for Margaret, feeling Robert's penetrating gaze on her back. Her neighbor entered the kitchen carrying a worried expression and a tray of cookies that she quickly placed on the counter. "I thought you might want something sweet to go with your conversation," said Margaret, her calm voice contrasting with the tension in the room. Robert emptied his whiskey glass in a single gulp and grabbed his car keys. "I don't need to stay here listening to these ridiculous accusations," he declared, heading for the door. "When you come to your senses, we'll talk." The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house, followed by the noise of the car engine accelerating down the street. Sarah collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling so much that Margaret had to help her hold a cup of tea. "He lied about everything, Margaret," whispered Sarah, her voice choked. "From the beginning. I was 23 when we met. I was so naive, so full of dreams." Margaret sat beside her, holding her hand firmly. "Tell me, dear. Sometimes carrying a weight alone only makes it heavier." Sarah closed her eyes, letting the memories flood her mind. Dad was a mechanic, had a small but thriving shop. Mom gave piano lessons at home. We weren't rich, but we never lacked anything, especially love. She took a deep breath, fighting back tears. Robert showed up one day at the shop, with his imported car and impeccable suit. It was such a different world from mine. The memories took her back to that time. The young and ambitious real estate agent who initially charmed everyone with his charm and good manners. But her parents, especially her father, began to notice small, worrying signs. Dad noticed how Robert treated people he considered inferior, continued Sarah. The way he talked to waiters, how he diminished others' work. Mom noticed how he always subtly criticized me. My way of dressing, speaking, behaving. Margaret poured more tea, adding honey to calm Sarah's nerves. And when they tried to warn you? Robert was smarter. He began to isolate me gradually, always with plausible excuses. He said my family was jealous of our love, that they wanted to keep me tied to that simple life. Sarah let out a bitter laugh. The day I announced our engagement, my father begged me to reconsider. He said Robert didn't truly love me, that he just wanted a trophy wife to show off to rich clients. And you chose not to listen, Margaret completed softly, with no judgment in her voice. Worse, I exploded. I said horrible things to my parents. I accused them of wanting to ruin my happiness out of pure selfishness. Sarah covered her face with her hands, shame burning in her chest. On the wedding day, they didn't attend. Michael, my brother, came to try to talk to me one last time, but Robert prevented him from seeing me before the ceremony. Margaret watched as Sarah took the old photo from her pocket, her fingers tracing the smiling faces of her family. In the first years, I tried to stay in touch, but Robert always had an excuse not to visit them. When I suggested inviting them to our house, he said he didn't want his clients to see my simple family around. Over time, the calls and letters became more rare, until they completely stopped. "And what about the children you always wanted?" asked Margaret gently. Robert swore he also wanted a big family, but after the wedding, he always made excuses, until he appeared with those falsified tests, saying he was sterile. Sarah felt a wave of anger growing in her chest. I consoled him, said it didn't matter, that I loved him anyway. And all this time, it was just another one of his manipulations. The clock on the wall marked almost midnight, but time seemed to have lost its meaning. In the silence of the kitchen, Sarah finally allowed years of hurt and regret to surface, her tears staining the photo in her hands. The next morning, Sarah woke up on the living room sofa, covered by a blanket that Margaret must have placed over her before leaving. The house was quiet. Robert hadn't returned during the night. Her cell phone was blinking with several notifications, all from the law firm where he worked. Checking the messages, her heart froze. Robert had contacted his lawyers during the early hours. The messages were clear and threatening. If she wanted a divorce, she would leave with nothing. The prenuptial agreement she had signed, young and in love, guaranteed that all assets would remain with him. With trembling hands, Sarah dragged herself to the bathroom. Opening the mirror cabinet to get her antidepressant, she discovered that all her medications had disappeared. In their place, she found a note written in Robert's impeccable handwriting. "I've already arranged for the cancellation of your health insurance and credit card. If you insist on this ridiculous divorce story, you'll have nowhere to go. Nobody will believe your accusations against me. I have an impeccable reputation in town. Think carefully before doing something stupid." Sarah felt panic growing in her chest. She ran downstairs to the kitchen, only to find her wallet empty. The cards and emergency money she kept had disappeared. In the garage, her car was no longer there. The phone rang, making her jump. It was Jennifer, Robert's secretary. "Sarah, I'm so sorry." Jennifer's voice was heavy with guilt. "Robert just fired me. He said it was because I warned you about him yesterday, but before leaving, I discovered something you need to know." Sarah sat down, feeling her legs weaken. "What is it, Jennifer?" "He's been planning this for months. I found documents in the system. He's been transferring money to offshore accounts, and there are property records in Ashley's name." Jennifer paused. "There's more. She's 3 months pregnant." The world seemed to spin around Sarah. The woman her husband was secretly meeting wasn't just his mistress. She was expecting the child he always said he couldn't have. "Robert asked me to prepare the divorce papers last week," Jennifer continued. "But it's not a fair agreement, Sarah. He's going to try to leave you with nothing, make you look mentally unstable. I've heard him arranging it with the lawyers." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Through the glass door, Sarah saw 2 men in suits. Robert's lawyers, she presumed. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from him. "They have a restraining order. If you don't cooperate, I'll make sure you're committed for psychiatric evaluation. After all, everyone knows you take antidepressants." Sarah backed away from the door, her heart beating so hard it felt like it would explode. The men continued ringing the doorbell with increasing insistence. On the phone, she could still hear Jennifer. "Sarah? Sarah? Are you still there? Listen, I kept copies of all the documents I found. I can help you, but you need to act fast." The knocking on the door grew louder. Sarah could hear one of the men announcing they were lawyers with a court summons. Across the street, she saw Margaret leaving her house with a worried expression. "You have 5 minutes to open up, or we'll call the police," shouted one of the lawyers. Sarah looked around, desperate. Her house, which once seemed like a refuge, now felt more like a prison. The beige walls that Robert had chosen seemed to suffocate her. On the shelves, the wedding photos, all perfectly arranged to show the happy couple they never were, seemed to mock her. Sarah watched the lawyer's shadows through the thin window curtain. Her heart was racing, but her mind, surprisingly, was beginning to clear. On the phone, Jennifer was still waiting for a response. "Jennifer, are you still at the office?" Sarah asked, her voice finding a firmness she didn't know she possessed. "Yes, I'm packing my things. They gave me an hour to leave." "Those documents you mentioned, can you meet me somewhere?" Margaret was crossing the street toward her house. The knocking on the door continued. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is your last chance," shouted one of the lawyers. Sarah made her decision in a matter of seconds. "Jennifer, meet me at the Central Library in an hour. I know exactly what I need to do." Hanging up the phone, Sarah ran to the bedroom. With steady hands, she grabbed her work bag and stuffed inside it the photo of her family, her personal documents, and the small amount of money she kept hidden in an old shoebox, her secret savings from the library that Robert never imagined existed. The knocking on the door grew more intense. Sarah heard Margaret's voice outside, arguing with the lawyers. "You can't intimidate a woman like this. I'm calling the police." That intervention gave her the precious minutes she needed. Sarah took her personal laptop, a gift from her brother Michael years ago that Robert never knew existed, and quickly tucked it into her bag. She looked at the bedroom she had shared with Robert for the last 12 years and felt only emptiness. She quietly descended the back stairs, crossing the kitchen for the last time. On the counter still sat the cookies Margaret had brought the night before. Next to them, the cold coffee cup and Robert's whiskey glass, traces of the life she was about to leave behind. Through the kitchen window, she saw Margaret still arguing with the lawyers at the main entrance. Her neighbor was gesturing energetically, keeping them distracted. Sarah realized it wasn't a coincidence. Margaret was intentionally providing cover for her. She slipped out the back door, crossing the garden she had tended with such care. Each flower planted there represented an attempt to bring beauty to a life that had long lost its color. Now, those same flowers witnessed her escape. Reaching the parallel street, Sarah allowed herself a moment to breathe. The weight of the last 12 years seemed to simultaneously crush her shoulders and dissipate into the morning air. She thought of her parents, of her brother Michael. The pain of longing and regret mingled with something new, hope. She caught a taxi several blocks away, giving the address of the library. During the journey, her hands found the old family photo at the bottom of her bag. Her parents' smiling faces looked different now. No longer a source of guilt, but a beacon of hope. "Are you all right, ma'am?" asked the taxi driver, noticing her troubled reflection in the rearview mirror. Sarah was surprised to realize she was smiling. "Yes," she answered, and for the first time in a long time, it was true. "I'm going home." The taxi traversed the busy city, leaving behind the house that had never truly been her home. Sarah knew the path ahead would be difficult. Robert would use all his power and influence to try to stop her. But something had changed within her. That naive young woman who had let herself be deceived by empty promises was finally growing up. "Drop me at the cafe across from the library, please," she instructed the driver. She needed to meet Jennifer, gather evidence of Robert's manipulations, and afterward, she would call the number her mother had left on the birthday card. It was time to try to fix the mistakes of the past. The cafe across from the library was almost empty at that hour of the morning. Sarah chose a table in the back, where she could observe both the entrance and the street. She ordered a strong coffee, the first she truly wanted to drink in weeks, not just out of habit or obligation. Jennifer arrived a few minutes later, carrying a thick folder and a cardboard box with her belongings from the office. Her eyes were red, but her expression was determined. "I managed to print everything before they blocked my access to the system," she said, sitting down. "There's more than I imagined, Sarah. Robert isn't just dishonest with you. He's been forging property documents for years." Sarah leafed through the papers Jennifer had brought. Bank statements, altered contracts, compromising emails. "Why are you helping me, Jennifer? You're risking a lot." "Because I was manipulated by him, too," Jennifer replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Robert promised me a partnership in the firm if I helped cover up certain things. It took me a while to realize he was using me, just like he uses everyone around him." As they talked, Sarah's cell phone vibrated with a message from Margaret. "The lawyers left. Robert is furious. Be careful, dear. I left something for you at your desk in the library." "We need to act quickly," said Jennifer, organizing the documents. "Robert has contacts everywhere. It won't take long for him to realize you've escaped." Sarah nodded, putting the papers in her bag. She crossed the street toward the library, where she had worked for so many years. The historic building, with its imposing columns, had always been her refuge. Now, it would be her starting point to freedom. At her desk, she found an envelope left by Margaret. Inside were $500 in cash and a note. "To help with your fresh start. You are stronger than you think. With love, M." Tears blurred her vision, but Sarah held them back. She had work to do. She turned on her computer for the last time and began gathering her personal files. Among them, she found something she had completely forgotten. An old email from Michael, her brother, with her parents' address. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number from the birthday card. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" Grace's voice, her mother, sounded exactly as Sarah remembered, soft and welcoming. "Mom?" Sarah felt her voice falter. "It's me, Sarah." The silence on the other end of the line lasted only a few seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. "Sarah? My daughter? Mom, I made a terrible mistake." The words now flowed like a torrent. "You were right about everything. Please forgive me." "Oh, dear." Grace's voice was choked up. "We never stopped loving you. We never stopped waiting for you. Can I come home?" "Of course you can. Where are you?" "Your father and I will come get you right now." Jennifer, who was watching the scene, smiled encouragingly. Sarah took a deep breath before answering. "I'm at the Central Library. But, Mom, there's one more thing I need to do first. I need to report Robert's frauds. I can't let him keep deceiving other people." "You're not alone anymore, sweetheart," Grace replied firmly. "Michael is a lawyer now, did you know? He can help you with all of this. Just give us 2 hours to get there." Sarah hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of emotions she could barely contain. She looked at Jennifer, who was already typing on her laptop. "I'm sending copies of all the documents to several secure emails," Jennifer explained. "Robert won't be able to erase the evidence this time." For the first time in years, Sarah felt she was in control of her life. The road ahead would still be difficult, but she was no longer alone. She had her family back, unexpected allies, and, most importantly, she had found her own strength. Sarah was organizing the last documents on her desk when an unusual commotion took over the library. Through the glass doors, she saw Robert entering the main hall, accompanied by 2 police officers. Her heart raced, but she kept her hands steady, continuing to scan the evidence Jennifer had brought. "Mrs. Mitchell?" One of the officers approached her desk. "Your husband filed a complaint. He's concerned about your mental state and says you stole confidential documents from his office." Robert remained a few steps behind, his face a mask of false concern. "Sarah, dear, you need help. Let me take care of you." Jennifer, who was at the computer next to her, stood up. "Officers, I have something you need to see. She opened her document folder. Was Mr. Mitchell's secretary. I have evidence here of real estate fraud and document forgery. She's lying, Robert quickly interrupted. I just fired her for incompetence. This is an attempt at revenge. The older officer frowned, looking at the papers Jennifer offered. Mr. Mitchell, these are serious accusations. We'll need to verify this. It's all lies. Robert's voice rose, attracting everyone's attention in the library. My wife is sick. She stopped taking her medications. She's having a psychotic episode. That's why I took her medicine, to ensure she would return to proper treatment. So you admit you removed her medications without consent? The second officer asked, his tone subtly changing. At that moment, the library doors opened again. Thomas and Grace Mitchell hurried in, followed by Michael, now a tall man wearing a well-cut suit. Robert's face visibly paled. Sarah! Grace ran to embrace her daughter, completely ignoring Robert's presence. Michael approached the officers, presenting his credentials. Michael Mitchell, attorney. I see my brother-in-law is trying his old manipulation tactics. You can't interfere, Robert protested. She's my wife. Soon-to-be ex-wife, Michael corrected, opening his briefcase. And here's a court order prohibiting you from approaching her. He handed a document to the officers. I got this as soon as my sister called this morning. I also have records of all suspicious financial transactions from the last few weeks, including the illegal transfer of assets and the unilateral cancellation of her health insurance. Thomas, who had been observing in silence until then, stepped forward. His hair was whiter than Sarah remembered, but his eyes maintained the same strength as always. 12 years, he said, his deep voice echoing in the silence of the library. 12 years you kept my daughter trapped in a cage of lies. But it's over, Robert. You can't do anything, Robert hissed, his usual charm completely dissipated. She signed a prenuptial agreement. She's not entitled to anything. Agreements based on fraud are invalid, Michael replied calmly. And we have enough evidence to invalidate not only the agreement, but also to initiate a criminal investigation into your activities. The officers exchanged glances, and the older one gestured to his partner. Mr. Mitchell, you'll need to come with us to the station to answer some questions. This is absurd. You can't. Robert stopped abruptly when the officer grabbed his arm. We also have some questions about the report we received this morning regarding real estate fraud, the officer added. You have the right to remain silent. Sarah watched as the officers escorted Robert out of the library. Her entire body was trembling, but no longer from fear. It was relief, mixed with a twinge of sadness for the lost time. Grace was still hugging her, and Thomas placed a protective hand on her shoulder. Let's go home, daughter, he said softly. Your mother kept your room exactly as you left it. Sarah's room remained intact, like a time capsule preserving the young woman she used to be. Posters of her favorite bands still decorated the walls, and a small collection of books occupied the wooden bookshelf her father had made especially for her. Sitting on her old twin bed, Sarah flipped through a photo album with her mother, while Michael worked on his laptop at the desk. The smell of apple pie wafted up from the kitchen, where Thomas was helping Grace prepare dinner. There's something you need to see, said Michael, turning his chair to face them. Jennifer sent me more documents. It seems Ashley isn't the first. Sarah felt her stomach turn. What do you mean? Robert has a pattern, Michael explained, turning the computer screen so they could see. In the last 15 years, he's been involved with at least 3 other women in the same way. He would approach them, marry them, isolate them from their family, and then leave them with nothing when he found someone with more money or social status. Grace squeezed Sarah's hand. Oh dear, there's more, Michael continued, opening another file. One of them, Catherine Peterson, tried to report him 5 years ago, but Robert used his connections to discredit her. She lost custody of her children and had to move to another state. Sarah stood up abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, her mother's garden remained as well tended as in her memories. The roses that Grace loved so much were in full bloom, their red petals dancing in the afternoon breeze. "I need to find this woman," said Sarah, turning to face her brother. "Catherine needs to know she's not alone, that we now have evidence." "I'm already one step ahead," Michael smiled. "Jennifer located her. She's living in Seattle, working as a teacher. And you won't believe it, but she kept all the documents from that time." At that moment, Thomas appeared in the doorway, holding the phone. "It's Margaret," he said, extending the device to Sarah. "She seems excited." "Sarah?" Margaret's voice trembled with excitement. "Ashley is here with me. She found out about Catherine and the others. Robert lied to her too, told her you were mentally unstable, and that you had made up all the accusations out of jealousy over her pregnancy." Sarah sat heavily on the bed. "Is she okay?" "She's devastated, but determined. She brought more evidence, emails, recorded conversations. Robert promised to divorce you and marry her before the baby was born, but she discovered he was courting an important investor's daughter at the same time." Michael was already typing furiously on his laptop. "This changes everything. With Ashley's testimony, we can not only invalidate the prenuptial agreement, but also ensure Robert goes to prison." Grace, who had been observing everything in silence, finally spoke. "Daughter, you didn't just save yourself. You're saving other women too." Sarah looked at the photo on her bedside table, the same one she had found among the groceries just 2 days ago. It seemed so long ago now. In the image, her family smiled, united and happy. Now she understood that that unconditional love had never really disappeared. It had just patiently waited for her to find her way back. "Margaret," she said into the phone, "tell Ashley she's not alone, that we're all stronger together now." Thomas, still standing in the doorway, discreetly wiped away a tear. "I'll set another place at the table," he said. "Looks like we'll have company for dinner." Michael closed his laptop with a satisfied smile. "I just sent all the documents to the prosecutor. Robert won't be able to escape this time." Sarah hugged her knees, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in years. Robert's lies were finally coming to light, one after another, like a house of cards collapsing. But instead of feeling destroyed by the revelation, he felt stronger, more determined. It wasn't just her story anymore. It was the story of all the women he had deceived. And together, they would ensure he couldn't do this again. 3 months had passed since the night Sarah left her old life behind. Autumn painted the neighborhood trees in shades of red and gold, and she watched the leaves dancing in the wind through the living room window of her parents' home, where an unusual group was gathering. Catherine Peterson, with her prematurely gray hair and gentle eyes, held a cup of tea while talking with Ashley, whose pregnant belly was now quite visible. Margaret, who had become a frequent visitor, distributed freshly baked cookies. Jennifer organized papers on the coffee table next to Michael. "The judge accepted all the evidence," announced Michael, unable to contain a smile. "Robert will answer for fraud, financial manipulation, and psychological coercion. The prosecution is convinced he'll get at least 10 years. "What about the money he hid?" asked Grace, who had entered the room bringing more tea. "We found almost everything," Jennifer replied. "He wasn't as smart as he thought. He left digital traces in all transactions." Sarah observed the group with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. Each person there had played a crucial role in her liberation. Catherine, with her courage to testify despite past trauma. Ashley, who chose truth even at the cost of her dreams of a traditional family. Margaret, Jennifer, and her family, who never stopped believing in her. "I got a new job," Catherine announced timidly. "I'm going to run the library at a private school here in town. I don't need to hide in Seattle anymore. And I decided to keep the baby," added Ashley, caressing her belly. "But he won't carry the Mitchell surname. He'll have my last name, and he'll grow up knowing his mother was strong enough to choose the truth." Thomas, who had been quiet in his favorite corner of the room, cleared his throat to get attention. "Sarah, I think it's time to tell them." Sarah smiled, feeling her face blush slightly. "I've been invited to be the new director of the Central Library. Apparently, the way I handled this whole situation impressed the board of directors. They say they need someone with strength and integrity in the position. The room filled with exclamations of joy and hugs. Margaret was the first to reach her. "I always knew you were much more than he allowed you to be. And there's one more thing," continued Sarah, her smile widening. "I'm writing a book about all of us, about finding strength when the world seems to be falling apart, and about how to recognize and escape abusive relationships," added Catherine. "The kind of book I wish I had read 15 years ago." Grace took her daughter's hand, her eyes shining with contained tears. "You've always been a great storyteller, since you were little. Now you'll be able to use that gift to help others." The afternoon sun came through the windows, bathing the room in a golden light. Sarah looked at each face, present, her blood family and the family that fate had brought her. Where before she saw only loneliness and despair, she now found strength, support, and endless possibilities. "You know what's most amazing?" said Jennifer, organizing the last documents. "Each of us lost something because of him. But look at what we've gained from each other." Michael raised his cup in an improvised toast, "To the strength of women who refuse to remain silenced." "And to family," added Thomas, his voice hoarse with emotion. "The one given to us by blood, and the one we choose along the way." Sarah felt her heart overflow with gratitude. The path had been difficult, but each step had brought her exactly where she needed to be. It wasn't just a happy ending. It was a new beginning, stronger and truer than any fairy tale Robert had tried to sell. A year had passed. The Mitchell garden was decorated with soft lights and tables scattered across the well-maintained lawn. A small improvised stage sheltered Sarah, who held in her hands her first published book, Breaking the Silence, a story of redemption and rebirth. The gathered audience was a peculiar and special mix. In the front row, Grace and Thomas smiled proudly. Beside them, Michael held Jennifer's hand. The two had grown close during the months working on the case, and, to everyone's delight, ended up falling in love. Margaret occupied her place of honor, as the first person who had the courage to extend a hand when Sarah needed it most. Catherine was present with her 2 teenage children, who now visited regularly since she regained custody, and Ashley, with her 3-month-old baby in her arms, a beautiful girl who had been named Hope. "When I decided to write this book," Sarah began, her voice firm and clear, "it wasn't just to tell my story. It was to give voice to all women who have felt trapped in relationships that diminish their light, that steal their essence." She paused, her eyes scanning the familiar faces. Robert was sentenced to 12 years in prison. The evidence we gathered not only proved his financial frauds, but also revealed a pattern of emotional abuse that spanned decades. The money he hid has been recovered and is being returned to his victims. "But this isn't a story about him," continued Sarah, her smile illuminating the garden more than the decorative lights. "It's a story about us, about how true family isn't defined by legal agreements or blood ties, but by love, support, and mutual understanding." Thomas rose discreetly, wiping away a tear. Grace squeezed his hand, both overflowing with pride for their daughter, who not only found her way back, but also helped others find theirs. "Each chapter of this book carries a lesson I learned along the way," Sarah continued. "I learned that strength doesn't mean never falling, but having the courage to get back up. I learned that forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, is a gift we give ourselves. And most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to start over." Little Hope let out a joyful laugh, as if in agreement. Ashley kissed her daughter's forehead, her eyes shining with tears of gratitude. Her decision to keep the baby, even in difficult circumstances, had proven to be the most right decision of her life. "Today, I'm not just launching a book," said Sarah, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm celebrating a rebirth, the rebirth of all of us." Catherine regained her voice and her children. Ashley found her strength in motherhood. Jennifer discovered her worth and true love. And she paused, looking at her parents, I rediscovered the meaning of family. Margaret stood up, starting a round of applause that was soon followed by everyone present. The sound echoed through the garden like a wave of approval and celebration. "The message I want to leave," concluded Sarah, "is that there is always hope. There is always a new dawn waiting for us. And most importantly, we are never truly alone." When she descended from the stage, she was enveloped in a collective embrace. Grace, Thomas, Michael, Jennifer, Margaret, Catherine, Ashley, each representing a fundamental piece in her journey of healing and rediscovery. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the Mitchell garden, where a young Sarah once played carefree, now a strong and accomplished woman celebrated not only her freedom, but the transformative power of true love and family support. "Welcome back, daughter," whispered Grace, embracing Sarah once more. "No, Mom," replied Sarah, looking at everyone around her. "Welcome back, family. If you've made it to the end with me, leave the word RESTART in the comments. And if you enjoyed the story, also leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. Thanks for the coffee. See you next time.